The cold came without warning. Carraith Station had always been cold, but this was different. This was the kind of cold that did not bite, it claimed. It slipped through metal walls, through sealed doors, through layers of technology that had protected dozens of species for decades. Warning lights flickered across the station, bathing long corridors in red and amber flashes. A calm, automated voice repeated the same message again and again in every known trade language. Primary power failure detected. Secondary systems offline. Emergency protocols engaged. For most beings on the station, those words meant one thing. Death was no longer theoretical. Captain Elias Rowan was in the middle of writing a supply report when the lights dimmed. He paused, fingers hovering over the console, then sighed. Humans had learned long ago that when a place went quiet like that, something had gone very wrong. He stood and rolled his shoulders, feeling the temperature already dropping. His breath did not fog yet, but it would soon. The heating vents along the walls had stopped humming. Of course, Elias muttered to himself. Middle of the cycle. Elias was human, born on a high-gravity colony world with long winters and short tempers. He was not particularly tall or muscular by human standards, but he had survived ice storms, power outages, and ration shortages back home. Compared to that, Carraith Station was supposed to be comfortable. Not anymore. Down the corridor outside his quarters, alien crew members were already moving fast. Some hurried, others stumbled. Elias opened his door and stepped into the hallway. The air was sharp now, cold enough to notice. A pair of slender, fur-covered Kalari passed him, their ears flattened in fear. A heavy-bodied Marn engineer cursed loudly as his joint seals stiffened. Further down, someone screamed as a door refused to open. Elias activated his wrist communicator. Rowan to Central. Status? Static answered him, followed by a broken transmission. Reactor containment. Failed cascade. Attempting manual override. That was not good. Carraith Station housed over 3,000 beings from more than 40 species. Many of them could not tolerate temperatures much lower than controlled room levels. Some required constant warmth just to keep their blood flowing. Humans were not one of those species. Elias moved toward the nearest junction, helping where he could, pulling open a jammed door for a panicking technician, guiding two smaller aliens toward an emergency shelter that was already filling up. The shelters were designed for short-term disasters. They had limited heating and limited space. They would not be enough. As the temperature continued to fall, Elias felt it in his fingers first. A dull ache, then stiffness. He flexed his hands and kept moving. That was when he saw Veilrix. The Theren ambassador stood near the wall, tall and angular, their crystalline skin usually clear and faintly glowing. Now, it was dull. The inner light fading. Fine cracks were forming along their limbs, spreading slowly like frost on glass. Theren physiology was delicate. Their bodies relied on stable thermal energy to maintain structure. Cold disrupted the internal vibrations that kept them alive. Veilrix swayed, one long arm bracing against the wall. Their breathing was shallow, uneven. Elias reached them just as their knees buckled. "Hey," Elias said, catching the alien before they hit the floor. Veilrix was lighter than expected, their body cold even through the fabric of Elias's uniform. Too cold. "Captain." "Rowan." Veilrix's voice sounded brittle, like thin ice under pressure. "Medical. Bay." "It's full," Elias said, glancing down the corridor. He could see the crowd, bodies pressed together. Emergency lights flashing. "We need another option." Veilrix's head tilted slightly, their eyes dim. "My quarters. Too far." Another shudder ran through their body, and Elias felt something shift unpleasantly beneath his grip. Structural stress. Theren could shatter if their core temperature dropped too far. Elias did not think. He acted. "My room is close," he said. "Come on." Supporting Veilrix's weight, he half-carried, half-dragged them back toward his quarters. Each step felt heavier as the cold deepened. The station's metal floor burned through the soles of his boots. Inside his room, the temperature was only marginally better, but at least there was shelter from the drafty corridors. Elias sealed the door and activated every emergency measure he had. The heater did nothing. The lights flickered, then stabilized at a dim glow. Valric slipped from his grasp and collapsed beside the narrow sleeping platform. Their limbs trembled, small cracks spreading further along their arms and torso. "I am failing," Valric said quietly. "You should leave." Elias shook his head. "Not happening." He pulled emergency thermal blankets from the wall compartment and wrapped them around Valrix's body. The material reflected heat, but there was not much heat left to reflect. Valrix's breathing slowed dangerously. "Permission," Valrix whispered, their voice barely audible. "To rest in your bed." For a moment, Elias hesitated, not because of discomfort, but because he understood what that request meant. Theren culture valued personal space and thermal balance. Sharing a resting surface was intimate, vulnerable. Then Valrix's light flickered again. "Yeah," Elias said immediately. Permission granted. He lifted Valrix onto the bed, positioning them carefully to avoid further stress fractures. The Theren's skin was painfully cold now, like holding ice that somehow still lived. Elias climbed onto the bed beside them, pulling the blankets over both of them. The space was cramped. Their bodies were close. Closer than Elias would have chosen under normal circumstances. Valrix stiffened slightly. "You need not." "Save it," Elias said. "You're freezing." He pressed himself closer, instinctively curling around Valrix to block exposed surfaces, the way humans did without thinking. His own body radiated warmth. Not much, but enough to feel against the alien's chilled form. Minutes passed. Elias focused on breathing, slowly, steadily. He could feel the cold seeping into him now, deeper than before. His teeth began to chatter, and his muscles ached as they worked to generate heat. Valrix's breathing changed. It grew stronger. The faint inner glow beneath their crystalline skin flickered, then steadied. The spreading cracks slowed, then stopped. Valrix let out a sound that might have been a sigh. "What are you doing?" they asked. "Staying warm," Elias replied. "I am absorbing thermal energy," Valrix said, confusion evident. "From you." "Good. That will weaken you," Elias snorted softly. "Not as much as you think." Outside the room, alarms continued to echo through the station. Somewhere, metal groaned as structures contracted under the cold. Emergency crews moved through the darkness, but there was little they could do now, except wait. Inside the small room, two very different beings lay together, wrapped in thin blankets and stubborn will. Elias's body worked the way human bodies always did in harsh conditions. His heart rate increased. Blood flowed faster. Muscles tensed and released in tiny movements, producing heat through effort alone. Calories burned. Warmth spread. Valrix felt it clearly now. The human was not just warm, he was generating warmth, actively, continuously, without conscious thought. "This is inefficient," Valrix murmured. "Humans are inefficient," Elias said. "We waste energy. Turns out that's useful sometimes." Time passed strangely after that. Elias drifted in and out of light sleep, waking whenever the cold grew sharper or Valrix shifted. Each time, he adjusted, pulling the alien closer, sharing what heat he had. Valrix remained awake longer, watching, sensing. They had studied humans before, read reports, attended briefings. Endurance, adaptability, persistence, all abstract words. This was different. This was warmth given freely, without calculation. Eventually, Valrix spoke again. "Captain Rowan." "Elias," he corrected sleepily. "Elias," Valrix said, testing the sound. "If I survive, this will be significant." Elias smiled faintly, eyes closed. Focus on surviving first. As the station continued to freeze around them, something unexpected happened. In that small room, life held on, and somewhere in the station's failing systems, sensors quietly recorded an anomaly. A Theren life sign stabilizing. Inside a human bed, the station did not recover. If anything, it grew worse. Car 8th station drifted in silence as power systems failed one by one. Emergency lights dimmed further, turning corridors into long tunnels of shadow and red haze. The artificial gravity flickered briefly, enough to make unsecured objects float before slamming back down. Somewhere deep in the structure, metal cracked with a sound like distant thunder. Inside Elias Rowan's quarters, time moved slowly. Elias woke with a sharp breath, his chest tight and his fingers numb. For a moment, he did not remember where he was. Then the cold reminded him. It pressed against his skin, heavy and constant, like an invisible weight. Velrix lay beside him, still wrapped in blankets, their crystalline body close against his own. Elias could feel the alien's surface now still cool, but no longer dangerously cold. That was a good sign. Elias shifted carefully, trying not to disturb them. His muscles protested, stiff and sore. He had been burning energy for hours. Even while sleeping, humans could do that, push their bodies without realizing it, but it came at a cost. Velrix stirred anyway. "You are weakening," Velrix said softly. Elias blinked, then chuckled weakly. "Morning to you too." "There is tremor in your limbs," Velrix continued. "Your temperature is decreasing." "Yeah," Elias admitted. "That happens." Velrix turned their head slightly, their inner glow brighter now than before. Not strong, but steady. Alive. This exchange is unequal. Elias tightened the blanket around them both. "You're alive." "That's equal enough for me." Outside the room, something slammed hard against the wall, followed by distant shouting. Elias tensed, then relaxed when no further impact came. Velrix listened, their senses sharper than Elias's. "The station is failing further." Velrix. Velrix. "No kidding." Velrix paused, then asked, "Why are there no humans seeking shelter with others of their kind?" Elias frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I have monitored emergency channels," Velrix said. "Humans are dispersing. They are moving toward areas with the highest concentration of vulnerable species." Velrix saddened. Velrix saddened. Elias absorbed that quietly. He was not surprised. But hearing it said out loud felt different. "That sounds about right," he said. Velrix shifted again, clearly uncomfortable. "This behavior lacks strategic sense. You are placing yourselves at risk." Elias smiled faintly. "We call that helping." A sudden alert sounded from Elias's wrist communicator. The display flickered, then stabilized enough to show a text-based emergency message. "Attention all personnel. Core temperatures critical. Shelter where possible. Movement discouraged." Elias exhaled slowly. "Looks like we're stuck here for a while." Velrix considered this. "Then you should conserve energy. You cannot continue generating heat indefinitely." "Maybe," Elias said. "But neither can you survive without it. So we compromise." Velrix did not answer immediately. Instead, they did something unexpected. They moved closer. The Theren adjusted their position carefully, aligning more of their body surface against Elias's chest and arms. Their crystalline structure resonated faintly. A soft vibration Elias could feel rather than hear. "What are you doing?" Elias asked. "Optimizing contact," Velrix replied. "If you are to provide thermal energy, it should be transferred efficiently." Elias laughed quietly. "You're making this sound very technical." "It is," Velrix said. Then, after a pause, "But I believe there is more to it than that." The temperature in the room continued to drop. Frost began to creep along the edges of the walls and the corners of the ceiling. Elias could see his breath now. Thin clouds forming and fading. Somewhere else on the station, a group of small insectoid researchers huddled around a human engineer who paced back and forth to generate heat. In another sector, humans shared body warmth with aquatic species whose tanks were failing, using emergency gels and sheer persistence to keep them alive. Reports of these actions began to circulate, passed from one frightened being to another like whispered hope. Stay with the humans. In Elias's room, Valric spoke again. Captain Elias. Yeah? If this continues, you may enter hypothermic stress. Elias nodded. I know. You may lose consciousness. Also aware. And yet you do not separate. Elias closed his eyes for a moment. You ever hear about pack animals? I am familiar with the concept, Valric said. Humans are like that, Elias continued. When things get bad, we bunch together. Share what we have. Even if it hurts, Valric processed this in silence. They had studied human history in abstract terms: wars, exploration, survival on hostile worlds. None of it had fully explained this instinct, this refusal to abandon. Hours passed. Elias drifted again, waking only when Valric's glow dimmed slightly, or when the cold spiked sharply. Each time, he adjusted, rubbing his hands together, pressing warmth back into his limbs before sharing it again. Eventually, the communicator chimed once more, central to all remaining responders. A strained voice said through the static. Reactor containment lost. Station temperature projected to reach non-survivable levels for most species within 2 hours. Valric stiffened. Non-survivable. Includes me. Elias swallowed. Yeah, it does. You must leave, Valric said firmly. Find others. Humans are needed elsewhere. Elias shook his head. I'm not leaving you. That is an order, Valric said, attempting authority. It sounded weak even to their own ears. Elias met their gaze. You're not my commanding officer. And even if you were, I'd still ignore you. Valric's glow pulsed erratically. This is irrational. Welcome to humanity, Elias said. A deep rumble shook the station, stronger than before. Something far away collapsed completely. The lights flickered, then went out entirely. Darkness filled the room. For a moment, there was nothing but cold and silence. Then Valric's inner light brightened, casting faint blue reflections across the walls. They could see Elias now, pale and shivering, jaw clenched as he fought to stay awake. You are hurting, Valric said quietly. Elias smiled weakly. Still here, Valric made a decision. Their species was not known for adaptability. They were precise, controlled, bound by physical limits. But limits could sometimes be pushed. Valric adjusted their internal resonance, slowing their own thermal absorption. It reduced the strain on Elias slightly. Even though it meant greater risk to themselves, Elias noticed the change immediately. Hey, don't do that. You are not the only one who can compromise, Valric replied. Elias stared at them for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. Outside the room, footsteps echoed. Voices called out. Human quarters. Anyone alive? Elias forced himself to sit up. In here. The door opened, letting in a wave of freezing air along with 2 humans and a short, heat-sensitive alien wrapped in emergency fabric. Their faces showed shock when they saw Valric. They're alive? One of the humans asked. Yeah, Elias said. For now. The newcomers hesitated. Space was limited, heat even more so. Elias looked at them, then at Valric. Get in, he said. We'll make it work. And they did. Bodies pressed together. Awkward and uncomfortable. But alive. Humans shifted. Moved. Breathed. Generating warmth through motion and effort, aliens clung to that warmth, surviving minute by minute. In the darkness of a dying station, a simple truth spread quietly from room to room. Humans did not just survive the cold. They shared their survival. And as Kareth Station froze, that truth became the difference between life and death. The cold reached a new level. It was no longer just uncomfortable or dangerous. It was absolute. The kind of cold that stole sound from metal and strength from living bodies. Kareth Station had become a frozen shell drifting in space, its systems nearly dead, its people surviving only through will and closeness. Inside Elias Rowan's quarters, the air felt heavy and sharp. Every breath burned. Frost coated the walls in thick white patterns, and the door seals creaked under the strain. There were 6 of them now, 3 humans, Valric, a small heat-sensitive alien whose species relied on constant warmth, and another tall, thin being, wrapped in emergency fabric, barely conscious. They lay and sat close together on the floor and bed, pressed shoulder to shoulder, leg to leg, sharing what little warmth they could create. No one spoke much anymore. Talking wasted energy. Elias sat against the wall, knees pulled to his chest, arms wrapped around the small alien in front of him. His hands were numb, his thoughts slow, every movement felt delayed, like his body had to ask permission before obeying. Velrix lay beside him, their glow faint but steady. Cracks still marked their crystalline skin, but they had not spread further. That alone felt like a miracle. Across the station, the situation was much the same. Emergency shelters had failed. Medical bays were frozen solid. Species that could not adapt had perished early. Quietly. Before panic could even spread. Those who lived now were those who had found humans. Humans who walked the halls until their legs shook, just to keep heat flowing. Humans who wrapped themselves around strangers without hesitation. Humans who joked through chattering teeth, because fear was easier to fight when laughed at. In one sector, a human maintenance worker collapsed after hours of movement. 2 other humans lifted him and kept walking, dragging their feet through ice and debris, refusing to let him cool too quickly. In another, a human pilot shared his heated flight suit with 3 aliens half his size, accepting frostbite so they could live. No one ordered this. No protocol explained it. It simply happened. Back in Elias's quarters, Velrix shifted slightly. The movement sent a sharp pain through Elias's leg, but he did not react. Pain meant he was still awake. "Elias," Velrix said softly. He opened his eyes with effort. "Yeah, you should sleep." Elias let out a weak laugh. "Bad idea. If I sleep too deep, I might not wake up." Velrix's glow pulsed faintly. "Then you must allow others to provide heat." Elias shook his head slowly. "I'm the warmest one here. That's just how it is." Velrix studied him in silence. Their species saw energy clearly, flows and exchanges that others only felt. Elias's internal systems were under extreme strain. His body was burning through reserves faster than nature intended. And yet he continued. "This defiance," Velrix said quietly. "It is not logical." Elias closed his eyes again. "Logic doesn't keep you warm." A loud crack echoed through the station, closer this time. The floor trembled slightly. Someone gasped. "The outer ring," one of the humans whispered. "It's breaking apart." The station was dying. Velrix felt a strange tightening within themselves. A sense of urgency that went beyond survival. "Elias," they said again. "There is something you must understand." Elias did not answer immediately. His breathing was shallow now, uneven. Velrix leaned closer, their crystalline surface brushing against his arm. They focused, adjusting their internal resonance carefully. The Ren physiology allowed for one dangerous action. A last resort response used only in extreme conditions. It could release stored vibrational energy rapidly, creating a temporary surge of heat. It was never used near others. It could shatter them, but humans were not like other species. Velrix hesitated, calculations running through their mind. Risk. Probability. Consequence. Then they remembered the human words. "We make it work." Velrix acted. A sudden warmth spread through the group, subtle but unmistakable. The air seemed to soften. Elias's shivering slowed slightly. Color returned faintly to the small alien's skin. One of the humans looked up in surprise. "Did it get warmer?" Velrix said nothing. Their glow dimmed sharply as the energy released. Fine cracks spread further along their torso, painful but controlled. Elias noticed immediately. "What did you do?" he asked, forcing his eyes open. Velrix's voice was steady, though strained. "I am sharing now." Elias frowned weakly. "That's not how this deal works." "It is now," Velrix replied. Minutes passed. The warmth faded slowly, but it had done its job. It bought them time. Elias felt strength return just enough to shift position, to rub life back into his arms and legs. Outside the room, Footsteps echoed again. More survivors. More humans guiding them, carrying them, pushing them toward any place where warmth still existed. "Central corridor is gone," someone shouted. "Hull breach in Sector 9. The station's orbit began to decay as systems failed. Rescue ships were still hours away, delayed by debris and unstable gravity fields. Hours that many would not have. Elias struggled to his feet, legs shaking. "We need to move. If this section breaks, we're done." One of the humans looked at him in disbelief. "You can barely stand." Elias nodded. "Yeah, but I can still walk." Velrix watched him, something like awe settling deep within their awareness. "You will carry others," Velrix said. "That's the plan." Carefully, painfully, they gathered the group. Elias took the small alien in his arms. Another human supported the taller one. Velrix walked on their own. Every step a risk. The corridor outside was a frozen nightmare. Ice coated the walls. Emergency lights flickered weakly, some completely dark. The floor was slick, uneven where panels had warped. They moved slowly, stopping often to rest, to breathe, to keep blood flowing. Along the way, they encountered others, humans and non-humans alike, moving in small groups, calling out softly, listening for replies. When they met, there was no hesitation. Groups merged, shared space, shared warmth, shared burden. Someone stumbled. 3 hands reached out. Someone fell silent. Humans pressed closer, refusing to let the cold take them. Velrix observed it all, recording every detail in memory. This was not just survival. This was a pattern, a defining behavior. At one junction, they found a large cargo bay still partially intact. Dozens of beings had already gathered there, packed together tightly. The air was warmer, not comfortable, but survivable. As Elias stepped inside, his knees finally gave out. He collapsed to the floor, still holding the small alien protectively. Hands grabbed him immediately. "Easy, easy. Get him down. Don't let him cool too fast." They laid him among others, bodies pressing close, heat surrounding him from all sides. Elias's vision blurred. Velrix knelt beside him, placing a hand against his chest. His heartbeat was weak but steady. "You have done enough," Velrix said softly. Elias managed a faint smile. "Still here?" Velrix felt something shift within themselves then. Not fear. Not logic. Respect. Across the station, sensors flickered back to life briefly as emergency power rerouted itself. In that brief window, data was recorded. Survival rates. Clusters of life signs. Every cluster centered around humans. Not because humans were strongest, but because they refused to let go. As Kareth Station continued its slow death, a truth spread quietly through the freezing dark. When the universe tried to take everything away, humans answered with closeness, with warmth, with each other, and that made all the difference. The rescue ships arrived like falling stars. At first, no one believed it. After so many hours of cold and darkness, hope felt dangerous. But then the station trembled in a different way, not from breaking metal or failing systems, but from controlled thrust. Lights flickered back on in weak pulses. A calm but urgent voice echoed through every remaining speaker. "Attention all survivors. This is Coalition Rescue Fleet. We have you. Hold position. Help is coming." In the cargo bay, people cried. Some laughed weakly. Some simply closed their eyes, too tired to react. Elias Rowan did not hear the announcement clearly. He drifted in and out of awareness, surrounded by warmth that was no longer only his own. Bodies pressed close, humans and aliens alike, sharing heat without thinking about who belonged where. Velrix stayed beside him, unmoving, their glow faint but present. Cracks covered much of their crystalline skin now, but they were alive. Rescue teams cut through the frozen hull carefully. The sound of tools echoed like distant thunder. Warm air flowed into sealed sections. Slow at first, then stronger. When the cargo bay doors finally opened, light flooded in. Real light. Rescue crews moved fast. wrapped in insulated suits, faces tense as they scanned the survivors. "Over here!" someone shouted. Medics rushed in, checking pulses, stabilizing temperatures, administering warm fluids, and emergency care. They worked in practiced silence, but their eyes widened at what they saw. So many species, packed together, alive. One medic knelt beside Elias, placing sensors against his neck and chest. Human male. Severe hypothermia. Still breathing. "He didn't stop moving," another survivor said hoarsely. "He kept everyone warm." The medic looked at Elias again, then at Valrix. "Get them both out. Priority." They were lifted carefully onto stretchers. As Elias was moved, his fingers twitched, tightening weakly around the small alien he had been holding. A medic gently loosened his grip, whispering reassurance. "It's okay. They're safe now." Valrix was carried beside him, their structure stabilized with resonance clamps to prevent further cracking. They watched Elias as they were moved, their thoughts slower but clear. He had survived. Against every reasonable expectation, he had survived. Hours later, Kareth Station was officially declared lost. Too much damage. Too many systems frozen beyond repair. The structure would be dismantled and salvaged what little could be saved, but the people were alive. Most of them. In the medical bay of the rescue flagship, Elias woke slowly. Warmth surrounded him, deep and steady. His body ached in ways he had never felt before. Every muscle protested. His head felt heavy. He opened his eyes to soft lighting and unfamiliar walls. "Hey," a voice said gently. "Easy." A human medic stood nearby, watching him closely. "You're safe. You did a number on yourself." Elias swallowed. "Others? Alive," the medic said. "A lot more than we expected." Elias closed his eyes again, relief washing over him. Moments later, another presence made itself known. A soft glow brightened the room. Valrix stood beside his bed, supported by a frame designed to hold their weakened structure. Cracks still marked their form, but they were stable. "You are awake," Valrix said. Elias smiled faintly. "Took my time." "You nearly died," Valrix replied. "Yeah," Elias said. "But I didn't." Valrix was silent for a long moment. Then they inclined their heads slightly. A gesture of deep respect in Theren culture. "Your species has altered my understanding of survival," Valrix said. "And of responsibility." Elias frowned weakly. "It is," Valrix replied. "The Coalition will study this event for generations." And they did. In the days that followed, reports spread through the Galactic Coalition faster than any official statement. Sensor logs, survivor testimonies, medical data. All of it told the same story. Survival clusters formed around humans, not because humans had superior technology, not because they were immune to cold, but because they shared heat, shared effort, shared pain. Coalition scientists struggled to classify it. Humans generated heat through constant micro-movements, through shivering, pacing, carrying, refusing to stay still. They burned energy at dangerous rates, willingly. More than that, they ignored instinctive self-preservation when others were at risk. It was inefficient. It was reckless. It worked. New terminology entered official records. Thermal anchors, biological stabilizers, crisis-sharing species. None of it fully captured the truth. In a public address weeks later, a senior coalition official spoke carefully, choosing every word. When the station failed, they said, many species were expected to perish. Instead, survival exceeded projections by a significant margin. This outcome is directly linked to human behavioral patterns. The footage showed images from Kareth Station, frozen corridors, groups huddled together, humans in the center, arms wrapped around others. Humanity does not endure alone, the official continued. They endure together. Elias recovered slowly. His muscles took weeks to regain strength. His hands bore faint scars from frost damage. But he healed. Valrix's recovery took longer. Theren's structures were not meant to fracture and reform, But with coalition support and new medical techniques inspired by the incident, they stabilized. When Elias was finally cleared for duty, he found Veilrix waiting. "I have requested reassignment," Veilrix said. Elias raised an eyebrow. "Yeah. To a joint species disaster response unit," Veilrix continued. "With humans." Elias chuckled. "Guess we made an impression." "You did more than that," Veilrix said. "You changed policy." New regulations followed quickly. Every deep space station required a minimum human presence. Emergency shelters were redesigned to allow shared warmth. Training programs taught non-human crews a simple lesson. In extreme conditions, find a human. Some species were offended by the implication at first. Others were grateful. Over time, it became accepted fact. On distant stations and frontier worlds, when systems failed and temperatures dropped, a phrase began to spread quietly through the panic. "Stay with the humans." Years later, Elias stood on the observation deck of a new station, far larger and better prepared than Kareth had ever been. Beside him stood Veilrix, their form restored, their glow strong. Below them, mixed crews moved through bright corridors, laughing, working, living. "You know," Elias said, "I didn't plan any of that." "I know," Veilrix replied. "That is what makes it significant." Elias leaned against the railing, watching stars drift by. "We just don't like letting people freeze." Veilrix considered that. "The universe is cold," they said. "Yeah," Elias agreed. "That's why we share warmth." And across the galaxy, that simple truth endured, not as legend, not as myth, but as policy, practice, and quiet respect. When the dark closed in and the cold came for everyone, humanity answered the same way it always had, by pulling others close, by saying, without words, "Let me rest in your bed, now I'm bound to warm it too."